What's up, guys? It's Damp. The most common question I've been getting, either on stream or just in game, from people who are new to the game or new to fishing in general, are asking me what setups to start with, and there's seems to be quite a bit of confusion from the streaming community, or even from people who are in the community, and what line to use and what reels without banging them up. I wanted to go through a few setups that I would recommend for really levels 1 through probably 20, about at that point. And we're primarily going to focus on feeder rods, and I'll explain why. So as you look at the float rods, they're pretty simple. If you decide you want to float fish, there isn't really a lot to them outside of they get bigger and heavier. Bolognese rods are a little bit of a unique situation, but until you get to probably 15, unless all you're doing is float fishing, you probably don't have a Bolognese rod. I'm not really going to focus on that. I mean, I can go back if you guys decide that's something you want to see, but for now, what we're going to focus on is the feeder rod, and I'm going to kind of go through why. So the easiest and fastest way to truthfully level up, in my opinion, is fishing 2 to 3 feeder rods, or 2 feeder rods and maybe a float. Managing 3 float rods, as you're putting rods up and down and you're picking them up, you could be losing slack, you could be setting the hook wrong. For a newer player, I think that the float rods are just miserable to try and use and level, and I think it actually can turn some people off from the game. So we're going to focus on feeder rods. Now, it does limit some of the species targeting, because you aren't able to catch pike. You don't catch as many perch sometimes, but we're going to focus on feeder rods. To start off, you start off with $50, and with that $50, I don't recommend you buy one right away, but probably by the time you get to level 5, maybe level 7, you can save a little money if you go to Winding Rivulet and buy any of these that we're going to talk about, by the way. That's the least expensive to buy any of these feeder rods, is going to be the Winding Rivulet. So as we talk about feeder rods, the first rod is pretty simple and straightforward. You're going to get the Express Fishing Sorrento FD100, which is about 37 at Mosquito. It's a little less at the Winding Rivulet. And then you're going to pair that with the Express Fishing Spark 3000S. And that's just because it's the easiest, most affordable to buy at a lower level. So save that $50 so that you're able to also account for a line, which, in my opinion, for that Spark, as you look at the reel that you're going to use, you can see the max drag is 3 kilogram. Now, that doesn't have to be the max size of line, but you want to keep it close to there until you learn the game's mechanics and what fish you can and can't catch. Because the last thing you want to do is hook a really big common carp or a really big grass carp when you get to Old Berg, or God forbid a catfish if you're using night crawlers, and have it break all your stuff, because then you're out of money and then you're kind of screwed. So as you're a newer player, I recommend keeping the max drag of the kilograms that you see here. So 3 kilograms, probably the max kilogram of the line you want to fish is going to be this 5-pound line, until you figure out what species are where and what will and won't catch the bigger species. Once you learn that, you can probably go up to about, I would say probably the 4.8 line, or the 10-pound, or the 8.5 would probably be okay once you get the mechanics down. But if you don't have the mechanics down, what's going to happen is you're going to break your reel, or you're going to break your rod, depending on what is heavier. Essentially, the heaviest piece is the last to break. The lightest piece is the first to break. So until you learn the mechanics of the game, I'd recommend that line is the first to break. So as we look at that setup, that's primarily the first thing you want to set up, are those 3 things. Now, obviously, you're going to need a sinker. Any of these affordable sinkers here are fine, and you're going to need a hook. Again, the hooks really don't matter too much when you're catching the really small fish. As you move on to some of the bigger species, I think the hooks absolutely matter for how long a fish stays on. So that's kind of the first setup that you're going to buy. Maybe you're level 5, level 7, you're going to buy that same setup. As you move on and you're looking at, hey, I got another $50, I've got $60 as I'm saving up, you're going to duplicate that again. You're going to buy that same stuff over again. So you have 2 of those same feeder rod setups, and you probably have your telestick, or maybe you have the bamboo rod that it comes with. Those are fine. The third thing you're going to buy, you either have the choice where you can buy a shovel from the workshop, which is over here, And the shovel essentially allows you to dig up worms and dig up your own bait, which does save you. Where is the shovel? Right here. So it's $38 here. Again, it's more affordable at Winding Rivulet. But I'm not saying this is something you have to buy. It's just an option you have at this point. I personally would get another feeder rod. If you decide you want to dig worms and do bait harvesting, you can. You can also probably befriend a few of the higher level players and send them messages and just say, hey, can you guys send me some worms? Most of the higher level players that have been digging worms probably have thousands of them. And the same thing for cottage cheese dough and, some of the other doughs that are in the game. So that's the third thing. You're either going to buy another duplicate of that express fishing combo, or you're going to buy a shovel. At this point, you're probably somewhere between level 8 and level 11, I would think. At really where you are here, what you want to try and do is you want to begin to upgrade your reel. And the first reel you want to upgrade to is the Lacerti 4000. Same thing. Keep your line, about probably under here until you understand the mechanics. At that point, you could probably go up to a 16-pound line or a 7.5 kilogram line. And these lines that you're buying are only the 100, really the 100-meter spools, because you aren't running into fish that are going to spool you, unless you're getting big common carps here, which I hope you're trying to avoid at Mosquito. But when you get to Old Berg, you're going to run into some fish that are going to spool you. So that's the caveat. When you get to Old Berg, if you're already level 12, you want to upgrade your line and really prioritize that, because what happens with that is it allows you to handle some of those bigger grass carp and get them in, and they're major chunks of XP. So at this point, you're going to upgrade your reels to Lacertes. Your option is this $100 model. Or the next thing you're going to buy is, if you feel like saving a little bit more, you can save for this Adriatica, which gives you a 7.5 kilogram max drag. Now, if you upgrade to this reel, if you notice the rod that we look at, that we're using, see where it says load capacity and it's only 5 kilograms? That means that your rod is essentially going to break before your reel if you happen to, let's say, have a really big fish that does some damage to you. So I'd recommend when you do the Adriatica that you move up to the Asteria FD 110, which gives you a load capacity of 8 kilograms. So you're looking at maybe $600 to $700 with that package, which might give you a bigger rod to try and handle some of those grass carp when you first get to Old Berg. So at Old Berg, ideally you want to have 3 feeder rods, and you want to have a couple upgraded reels like the Lacertes or maybe an Adriatica. If you do have an Adriatica, one of the things I'd recommend is, and you can use really either of these two guys. There's not, I don't want to say there isn't a huge difference between them. If you look here, line capacity of 0.26 is 131 meters. Line capacity here is 159 meters, so this gives you a little more. It's got a little bigger spool on it. Again, that's completely up to you, whichever way you want to do it. There isn't a major difference between them. Usually the $30 means you're able to save some money. But anyway, back to Old Berg. So you get to Old Berg, you're looking at bigger grass carp, probably some common carp in there. The tench can be, commonly between 1.5 and 3 kilogram. So you want to look at upgrading your reels first. And then you may have an Adriatica, and the Asteria FD 110 is the rod you would pair with that. As far as the line, again, be conservative until you learn the mechanics, but once you have them down, it's okay to go up a little bit more. So you can go probably between 16 and 23 pound line on the Adriatica. And I would buy the 5000S, this one here. It served me really well until level 20. I still use it even into level 21. I use it on a jigging rod now. As you look at where do you go beyond that, so between levels 12 and 16, your major upgrade that you're pursuing is the Sabre 60S. And this is pretty commonly known throughout the community, but the reason is the max drag per dollar, and you're able to use some heavier lines. So on the Sabre 60, you can probably use between 23 and 40 pound line. Again, just depending on how comfortable you are with the reel. When you're looking at upgrading your rod for the Sabre 60, the Percy FD 110 or 140 are good options there. and they're about 300. So you look about 1,000 for your first big combo. Um, and the reason I say, first big combo is probably that's going to be your first major investment. But once you get to level 16 and you can go to Kaori Lake, money isn't nearly as tight as what it once was, especially when you're at Mosquito and Old Berg. Um, you can catch fish. One fish that's 1.5 kilograms can be worth $20 if you catch a char. Burbot can be very consistent and fairly easy to catch over 3 days there, and they're paying you between $10 to $15 for a decent sized fish. So your money isn't as much of a concern as you begin to get into 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. The farther you go on, the less money is really a concern until you have to begin to repair these reels. So then the last one, as you get to probably early 20s, people typically look at the Siberia Gold ADS. Obviously, you can see it's sold out here. Again, max drag per dollar. It's a really high quality. It's 4 stars out of 5. You're able to use some decent heavy line there, but again, you have to be level 20 to use it. The Sabre 60, you have to be level 16. That's one thing I should mention. It does have a level 16 requirement on it. The Adriatica is a level 12 requirement. So keep those in mind as you're beginning to shop. Don't go out and buy gold and then buy them and then you can't use them. But those should be some to really kind of get you started. Again, remember at level 12, when you get to Old Berg, I'd recommend upgrading your line sooner rather than later. If you can't upgrade your line, target some of the smaller species. Stay away from the grass carp. So be selective when you're using cheese as a bait. Be selective when you're using potatoes. Don't use cabbage at all. Don't use any of the green boilies. Any of the things that really target grass carp specifically, stay away from. It's not to say that you can't land a small one, but there's nothing more frustrating when you get to that lake and you fight one for 30 minutes and it eventually spools you, or you fall in a hole, those kinds of things. So with that, I'll go kind of briefly through them again. So you're looking at your first one is the Sorrento FD100 is the rod you start with. Right here. And then the reel is going to be the Spark at 950. Again, this is in Mosquito. You're going to duplicate that about 3 times to give you 3 feeders that are pretty similar. The line you want to use on them, again, keep in mind your max drag and keep it under there. And usually your reel will have less load capacity than your rod. That's why I'm usually referencing those. After there, you're looking at upgrading your reels to the Lacertes, one of these two. And then from that point, you're going to upgrade to the Adriatica, or you could save for the Sabre 60, either one of those two. This is level 12, that's level 16. From there, from the Sabre 60, you'd go to the Sabre 80, the Gold ADS. And at that point, you may also have access to, if you've been doing spin fishing, you'd have access to some of the bait casters. But really, for probably the first 20 to 22 levels, unless you've done a ton of spin fishing, you're probably mostly only using spinning reels for float, spin, and then also feeder fishing. So hopefully that gives you guys a better idea of where to start. I hope it was helpful. If you have more questions or you want to see certain videos, please put them in the comments below. And thanks for watching. See you later.